The title of the sermon is Amazed. So what amazes you? What amazes you? One thing that amazes me is the healing power of our bodies. The healing power of our bodies. For example, you look at the liver, look at how resilient it is. So I read this, that even if it's reduced by as much as 75%, that it can grow back to its normal size. And it's like rapid replication of liver cells, and it takes like about a month. Like that's just unbelievable to me. When I read that, I was like, how is that possible? And you think about the ways that our bodies heal, the way that God has designed our bodies to heal, and the way that God has designed sleep, so that when we sleep, our bodies heal and restore. And some things are just amazing. You look at all the things made out of different types of materials. You look at steel, all the things that have been made out of steel. The fact that we have steel and that you can use it for this and that. For the plastic, plastic has been used for almost everything that you buy online is made of plastic nowadays. But you can find all of these different, computers are made. There's construction vehicles that have been made. There's look at airplanes, skyscrapers. Look at all of these things that are made out of materials. That's pretty amazing to me. I know we take it for granted now because we just see it everywhere. But if you actually step back and pretend like you lived a couple hundred years ago, and if you were born like 300, 400, 500 years ago, and then stepped into today, just imagine the culture shock you would go through. Just be like, how is this possible that they have all these things, and how did they do that? I don't understand. Another thing that amazes me is how many times a kid can say mom in a day. I know some of you moms probably can relate to that, but I hear that it's kind of nice sometimes when they're not saying dad, and then but I understand that can be taxing on a mom. Then all the time it's like, mom, hey mom, I got a question for this, mom, this, and it just keeps coming and coming, and it's like, all right. Something else that amazes me, a sunset. That is one of the most amazing things. Have you guys ever seen like a gorgeous sunset? You guys can probably remember right now, like different times where you saw an amazing sunset, where you're like, oh, I remember I was by this lake, or I was at this place, and the sunset was just gorgeous. It was just amazing, the way that God paints the sky. It's incredible. Or you look at the way that children grow, the way that they learn to walk and talk. It's amazing. You start to see like the little things. The first year or two, especially, of a child's life is incredible to watch, to see how they change, how they grow, and how they learn about their environment. Another thing that is amazing to me is how many languages that are spoken in the world. So many languages. And each one has its different nuances. Each one has the different things that are fascinating about it. There's certain words in one language that don't really translate well into other language. For example, there's a word in Chinese called mafan, and it kind of means trouble. And so people sometimes will use that word, but there's not really an equal translation necessarily in English. But it's a beautiful word, and actually, we had a good friend that they named their dog Mafan, and because it's like trouble, just the idea of. But it's a really good word for when things are going bad, when there's things that are difficult in life. But there's so many languages like that, where there's little nuances that are just a little bit different, and the way people communicate, and the idea that God's given us our voice, our tongue, and to create all these different sounds, to do all these different languages. Like, I think it's fascinating and just amazes me. So the definition of amazed is feeling or showing great surprise or wonder. So this past Monday and Tuesday, I went to Lake Geneva Bible camp in Alexandria for a prayer and fasting retreat. And it was beautiful weather during the trip up there, and I was just grateful. I was in awe, like looking out at the lake, the trees, the simple, cool breeze. I was amazed at the natural. In Genesis 1:31, it says, "And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day." In Psalm 19:1, it says, "The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands." It's amazing to look at the world around us and be amazed. So many times we get so busy with the day-to-day that we don't step back and allow ourselves to be amazed at what God has created. I am also amazed that I'm alive. Anybody else amazed sometimes that you're alive? I know when I was young, we had a babysitter one day when I was living in Clearwater, Minnesota. And my parents were out on date. We had a babysitter, all the neighboring kids. We were all biking and stuff like that. And there was one motorcycle that went flying by on our small road. And then so I went to turn around, crossing the road to turn the other way. And all of a sudden, a motorcycle came and it hit me. And it was going 80 miles per hour, and it kept going. I went flipping, and I was surprisingly not hurt that bad. I got some stitches and whatnot, but the week before, someone had died getting hit by a motorcycle. You know, this was a situation where the ambulance came. They brought the neighbors, picked me up, brought me to the table. They put me in the ambulance, brought me there. I wasn't talking to anybody. The doctor was like, I think he might have some brain damage. I don't know. He's not communicating, you know. But as soon as my mom walked in the room, all of a sudden I was like, Stacy didn't tell me about the other motorcycle. Like my sister didn't tell me about the second one, you know. And they're like, oh, I guess he's fine. I guess his brain's all right. But I've had pneumonia twice. Once when I was doing this musical in high school, and I was like, I got to keep doing it. We have a few more nights, and you know, I was taking cough syrup all the time. I was going right to bed when I got home. Like I was just, it was horrible. And then finally, after the musical was done, I was taken to the doctor, and they were like, yeah, we need to check you in now to the hospital. If you go another 2 weeks, you're gonna be dead. And I was like, oh. Of course, at that point, that was shocking to me. I was, 16-year-old. I was like, you think, okay, I'm healthy, I'm fine. But God continued to watch over me. When I took a missions trip to El Salvador, we almost drove off a cliff on those buses. There's some of these roads that you take, some of these places when you're overseas are pretty treacherous. There was a time where also we were driving, and there was some guerrilla guys with machine guns that usually pull over people and rob them and things like that. They saw our couple buses, and so they actually backed off the road and let us go through and didn't do anything. So we were like, all right, thank you, God. Thank you for that. There was a time where we were doing this program, and we were leading people to Jesus. They had an opportunity to accept Jesus. And all of a sudden, we saw a funnel cloud right next to us. And we were like, all right, God, if this is the way we're going, this is the way to go, leading people to Jesus. Let's do this. But that, you still are like, all right, God, thank you. I'm surprised I'm alive. There was a time where I was driving with my wife. We were going from Wisconsin to Minnesota, and it was raining at night as we were driving at 70 miles an hour. And all of a sudden, the deer runs across the road. You hit the deer. It got caught up. The leg got caught up in our Ford Escort station wagon. We pulled over to the side, and nothing else happened. We were able to get safe to the side. A semi-truck pulled over and pulled the leg out of our wheel well. And but the idea that, okay, in that situation, there's so many bad things that could happen in that situation. You think about when we were living in China, we took this winding road from Yan'an to Xi'an. And we were driving with this other foreign lady, and she was an interesting driver. We were driving a stick shift, and with the way that the roads had to go, it was very nerve-wracking. Me and Megan would kind of debate, okay, who's going to be in the front seat and who's going to lay down in the back and not look at all? Because there were times where there were trucks that were going 5 miles per hour, and there were times that there was sports cars going 70 miles per hour around these hairpin turns and whatnot, and we saw semis on fire, vehicles fall off. Yeah, it was the things that we saw were just scary, and so it's like, all right, we survived. We made it another time. And we also had minor accidents in taxis in China, where we were like, okay, that could have been a lot worse. One funny situation is I used to do a paper route when I was growing up. And one day, there was always usually one paper left over. One day I was riding my bike back, and I was reading the newspaper while I was riding, and I hit a parked car and flew over it. And when I was growing up, I also made those homemade skateboard ramps where you're rollerbladed ramps and go up, and where you crash and you get hurt. In Taylor Falls, I don't know if you've ever been in Taylor Falls, where there's those cliffs, and it's just beautiful. In college, my freshman year, we're like, let's go cliff jumping. And, so we're jumping off, 35, 40 feet, and it's like, okay, this is, you look back at some of these things, and you're like, how am I still alive? I've had COVID. I've had all these close calls while I was driving. I had those moments where you're driving, all of a sudden everything stops in front of you, and you're swerving to get around. Many of you probably feel the same way, where you're like, yes, I'm surprised I'm alive. Like, if it wasn't for God, I wouldn't be alive. It's amazing to think about how God watches over us each and every day, how he is with us. I'm amazed at the supernatural. In Matthew 12, 22 through 23, it says, then a demon-oppressed man who was blind and mute was brought to him, and he healed him, so that the man spoke and saw, and all the people were amazed and said, can this be the Son of David? In Luke 9, 37 through 43, it says, the next day when they came down from the mountain, a large crowd met him. A man in the crowd called out, teacher, I beg you to look at my son, for he is my only child. Wow, you think about that, like the cry of a heart of someone that this is their only child and something is wrong. I mean, it says a spirit seizes him and he suddenly screams. It throws him into convulsions so that he foams at the mouth. It scarcely ever leaves him and is destroying him. Now, this is a desperate parent. This is a desperate parent. I don't know if you've ever had that situation where you're just desperate as a parent, like, I want to do whatever to make sure my kid is healthy. I want to do whatever to make sure that my kid is all right. I begged your disciples to drive it out, but they could not. Jesus says, you unbelieving and perverse generation, Jesus replied, how long shall I stay with you and put up with you? Bring your son here. Even while the boy was coming, the demon threw him to the ground in a convulsion. But Jesus rebuked the impure spirit, healed the boy, and gave him back to his father. And they were amazed at the greatness of God. It's amazing the miracles that Jesus did and that Jesus does. In Mark 6, starting in verse 45, it says, immediately Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to Bethsaida. Well, he dismissed the crowd. After leaving them, he went up on a mountainside to pray. This is one thing that's amazing about Jesus, is that he always took time to pray. Always took time to show us the example of, like, you need to be in prayer to the Father. You need to spend time talking to God. And it says, when evening came, the boat was in the middle of the lake, and he was alone on land. And he saw the disciples straining at the oars because the wind was against them. About the fourth watch of the night, he went out to them, walking on the lake. Wait, what? He was walking on the lake. Okay, this wasn't the middle of winter. He wasn't walking on ice. He was walking on the lake. That's pretty amazing, isn't it? You guys ever, as a kid, you guys ever try that, like walking on the shallow? You're like, okay, I'm gonna be like Jesus. Or, it's fascinating to read these stories, and instead of just to skip over them, be like, okay, yeah, he walked in water, yeah, we know that. But to actually think about that in reality, to think about that, to look at a lake and be like, wow, Jesus walked across a lake. That's amazing. So he was about to pass by them, which is an interesting statement in itself. He's about to pass by them. But when they saw him walking on the lake, they thought he was a ghost. They cried out because they all saw him and were terrified. Immediately he spoke to them and said, take courage, it is I. Do not be afraid. Then he climbed into the boat with them, and the wind died down. They were completely amazed. I love this because, he gets on the boat and the wind stops. It just stops. And it's like, wow. It's, Jesus' power and authority is something to be amazed at. We have to take moments. I mean, have you ever watched a football game and you wondered, how did they catch that? How did they catch that ball? I mean, there was one highlight where I watched where it was like it bounced off of one guy, then bounced off of a different guy, and then the other guy just fell in his lap in the end zone, and he got a touchdown. It's like, how is that possible? Okay, let me get my DVR, they got to show a replay. They show the replay. Oh, wow, look at that. And then you're watching again and again. You're like, let's see. Okay, that bounce. How did that happen? And you're just in amazement. And you're like, I can't believe that. Especially if it's your team, and they're down and it's like a winning catch. Then you're like, did you just see that? You're calling up all your friends. You're telling them, did you see what just happened? That's amazing. And it seems impossible. When Jesus did these miracles, they didn't need instant replay. It was obvious. The blind and the mute man was healed. He could see. He could talk. He could hear. The son that went into convulsions no longer had convulsions. He was healed. You could see it. You could look at him and be like, he's changed. It's different. When the wind died down, you think they noticed? You think that was obvious? They're fighting against this wind, and it's just blasting at them, and then the next second, it's calm. I mean, they didn't need an instant replay for that. They knew, all right, something's going on here. Jesus is amazing. Look at what he just did. And it was almost impossible for them to believe. See, sometimes stories from individual people's lives amaze me too. Look at this one person named Kenneth Ware. He was born in 1917. And at 15, he was running down the streets of Switzerland. So just a boy running on the streets when he passed by the famous evangelist Smith Wigglesworth. And Smith Wigglesworth called to him, and he said, "Come here, boy, put out your tongue." Okay, what? You're talking to a 15-year-old boy and you want to put out your tongue? That's just really strange. But this boy thought, okay, maybe he's a doctor or something like that. He's obviously from a different place. And so, he put out his tongue, and Smith Wigglesworth grabbed it and said, "Lad, this tongue will preach the gospel." And at that moment, Kenneth no longer struggled with the stutter that he had his whole life. It was gone. Later on, he felt called to preach, called to be a pastor, and he was involved in so many ministries and led many people to Jesus and was used by God. So the stories like that amaze me because it's sometimes these random moments where somebody obeyed God and did something, even if it was unexpected. They obeyed God and they listened closely to what he said. I'm amazed at this friend of mine that went to North Central, named Nate Kemper. On September 27th, he just ran and walked for 1,000 minutes in one day. So if you haven't done the math yet, that's over 16 hours of the day. That means he woke up at around a little after 4 a.m., and he started with his running and walking and going. And it wasn't walking the whole time. A lot of times it was running, but he went for over 16 hours for one day. So why did he do that? He did that so he could raise money for this group called Venture. It's this group that a roommate of mine at college, he was one of the guys that helped found it, and it's this group that does amazing ministry around the world, but one of the things that they specialize in is helping girls in Nepal to get out of the sex trafficking industry. And so he wanted to raise money to help these girls stop these girls from getting trafficked in Nepal. And so he raised over $14,000 for that one day for doing that. That amazes me. I can't imagine over 16 hours of trying to run and walk. Can you imagine that one day? I can't imagine that. I'm sorry, I can't imagine that. But he was like, all right, God, what is something I can do? I know there's certain things I can do, certain things I can't do, but what is something I can do to honor you, God? What is something I can do to be used of you? There was a missionary that shared this story. There's a special place in our hearts is Elam Home in Myanmar. We work to support Elam Home in its calling to raise impoverished orphans and neglected children. Over the years, Elam Home has served over 120 children. It is run by Pastor Swan Gokai and his wife. They are fulfilling James 1:27 and caring for the orphans that were hopeless and helpless. And it's truly impressive what he did with this home because all 120 children have completed junior high school. 75% completed high school, and a third of them finished or are in Bible college, or nursing school. And most importantly, all of these children have heard and accept the gospel in this mostly Buddhist nation. To me, that's incredible. 120 children that they invested in. They said, okay, we are going to invest in these children. We are going to go and use what we can to help and to minister to these kids. That is amazing to me. Those stories of people that have sacrificed, those stories of people that have seen a need and decided, okay, I'm going to fill that need. There's one more story in the Bible where someone was amazed. In Luke 7, 1 through 10, Luke 7, 1 through 10, it says, when Jesus had finished saying all this in the hearing of the people, he entered Capernaum. There, a centurion's servant, whom his master valued highly, was sick and about to die. The centurion heard of Jesus and sent some elders of the Jews to him, asking him to come and heal his servant. When they came to Jesus, they pleaded earnestly with him. This man deserves to have you do this because he loves our nation and has built our synagogue. So Jesus went with them. He was not far from the house when the centurion sent friends to say to him, Lord, don't trouble yourself, for I do not deserve to have you come under my roof. That is why I did not even consider myself worthy to come to you. But say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I myself am a man under authority, with soldiers under me. I tell this one, go, and he goes, and that one, come, and he comes. I say to my servant, do this, and he does it. When Jesus heard this, he was amazed at him. And turning to the crowd following him, he said, I tell you, I have not found such great faith even in Israel. Then the men who had been sent returned to the house and found the servant well. You look at this centurion's faith. We see that Jesus, he marveled at it. And it reminds us that there's only 2 times where it talks about Jesus being amazed in the Bible. And the other time was because he was amazed at the lack of faith of those in his hometown. And he was only able to do a few miracles there because of their lack of faith. So you look at that, a Roman centurion, wasn't an Israelite, had more faith than the people that Jesus grew up with, had more faith than those that saw him live this perfect life. Let's not be the people who Jesus is amazed at because of their unbelief. Today we have the opportunity to be amazed. We have the opportunity to reflect on life and be amazed. I'm amazed that God has given me today. I'm amazed that I have breath for this moment. Sometimes I believe that we need to take moments to reflect on the things that God has done for us, on the things that Jesus has done for us, to reflect and be amazed at some of the simplest things. I know sometimes looking at your child, it's amazing. And I say, thank you, God, that you blessed me with this child. Even in the worst circumstances, even when they're misbehaving, it is a blessing. It is a blessing. It's a blessing to be able to have each day. For anybody that's had to be in a hospital for an extended period of time, you know what a blessing it is to be able to be out of the hospital and to be able to walk and be home and be around family, to be able to live. It is a blessing. Take a moment to be amazed at who God is. Take a moment to be amazed at his love for you, and that he continues to show us grace. He continues to show us grace even when we don't deserve it. He continues to show us mercy when we don't deserve it. I want you to take a few things from this message. One is to slow down enough to be amazed. Like we were talking about, slow down enough to be amazed. In our culture, it's very easy to get busy. Some of you have probably already gone through some of your lists of what you got to do today during this message. You're probably already thinking, okay, I got to do this. We're busy. That's our MO. That's what we do. We're Americans. It's like we've got stuff to get done. We got to. Life is too busy to stop and rest. But if you just take some time, take a day, take an hour, take some time and say, all right, God, I'm going to slow down so that I can hear your voice. I'm going to slow down so that I can listen. And you'll be amazed. When you take that time, you'll realize, wow, like, I actually can relax. I actually can focus and allow God to speak to me. I don't have to have a bajillion things going through my mind 1,000,000 miles an hour and never stop. But sometimes it takes that conscious effort to do that. You have to take that moment and say, all right, I'm going to step back and be amazed at God and allow him to speak into my heart. Number 2, I want you to continue to believe for the supernatural. Jesus is still doing miracles today, just like he did when he walked this earth. He is still doing miracles. Look for the supernatural. Look for opportunities for God to use you in the supernatural. Look for opportunities to begin to pray that God would do things supernaturally. Through your prayers, people around this world can know Jesus. There's been stories of people in the Muslim world that they will wake up with a vision of Jesus in the night. And I believe that happens because of you guys praying. When you pray, God moves in people's lives. He desires to have us pray. He desires to use our prayers for his glory, that he might get glory. And number 3, allow God to fill you with a faith that shows you trust in him. So that your faith is one that trusts in him. Not that you be filled with unbelief. Not that you would be one of those that Jesus is amazed by their lack of faith. But the people would see your faith in Jesus. That they would be amazed. They would be like, I know what that person's going through. I know some of what's going on in their life. But it's amazing to look at their faith and how they continue to trust in God. They've continued to trust in God despite the chaos in their family. They've continued to trust in God despite the deaths that have happened in their family. They continue to trust God in the midst of everything that's going on in their life. Like may we be those people that are people of faith, that are trusting in God, regardless of what we're going through, that people will see that. People will say, that person, they have a faith like no other, and I want that because I'm thrown by these waves all over the place, and my emotions are leading me everywhere, and I don't know what to think. But that person, like they're human. They still have things like I do, but their faith, like it's amazing. They just trust in God. That's what he wants us to be, people filled with faith. And so let's go to the Lord in prayer today. God, thank you so much for your love for us. Thank you for your unending love that you continue to pour it out upon our hearts. Jesus, thank you so much that you have a purpose and a plan for our life. I pray that we would step back long enough to just listen to your voice. So many times we're talking so much that we don't hear. Just like as in conversations with other people, a lot of times we're anticipating when they're going to be done so we can say what's on our mind. Sometimes I believe that that's the way we are with you, God, that we have so many things that we want to say, and even prayer requests that we have, which is great. You love hearing our voice. But sometimes we need to take a moment and listen. Listen to what you want to say to us. Listen to what you want to share. Listen to the things that you want us to do. Jesus, I pray that today, that this week, that we would take a moment, that we would consciously put it in our schedule to take time to hear your voice, that we would take time to reflect upon your greatness, that we would take some time to, whether it's going for a walk outside or sitting on our porch and just being in awe of who you are, that we would just begin to worship you for the greatness of who you are, and that we would look at all the things that you've done in our life. We would look at all the things that you've created, and that we would just thank you for it. That we would just be grateful for who you are. Thank you, God, that you love us. I pray that you would meet us in the midst of situations that seem impossible. You are the God of the impossible. You want to bring answers to real problems. But it requires us to trust in you and to walk in obedience. I pray today that we would do that. Thank you, Jesus. Amen.